Canada, our home and native land. True patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
The City of Barrie acknowledges the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, which include the Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We also acknowledge the Wendat Nation Huron, who occupied these lands prior to the middle of the 17th century. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land. We are committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. You may be seated. Members of Council, as there's no student mayors, we will move on to the confirmation of the minutes. The first item on the agenda is a confirmation minutes. The minutes of the City Council meeting held on November 30th, 2022 have been circulated. Are there any corrections from members of Council? Seeing none, the minutes are adopted as printed and circulated. We will now move into the awards and recognition. This evening there are two presentations listed under awards and recognition. The first of which is a recognition of the winner of the 2022 Mayor's Christmas Card Contest. We'll wait for... Thank you. So I'm pleased to announce that Enrique Bravo is the winner of the 2022 Mayor's Christmas Card Contest for his submission entitled Midnight Together. Mr. Bravo is a Barrie artist whose many painting works, including elephants, cats, winter scenes, and many more, can be viewed and purchased through various venues throughout the city, including the Artisan Boutique in downtown Barrie. I would like to call upon Enrique Bravo to join me at the podium. Enrique, on behalf of the City of Barrie, on behalf of our council, and certainly the people around the City of Barrie, thank you so much for your contribution this year for the Christmas card. As you know, we have a very vibrant community here in terms of arts and culture, and your contribution this year is much welcome. So thank you on behalf of our entire team.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm grateful.
We're going to grab a quick photo with Wendy here, if that's okay. Actually, it's only with Wendy if she jumps in it, isn't it? Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rob. Appreciate it. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to our second presentation this evening. It's recognition of the Barrie Soccer Club girls under 16 district soccer team on winning the provincial championship in 2022 Ontario Cup. For the girls under 16 district division, I would like to call upon Joe Pelleggi, head coach or representative for the girls under 16 soccer team, to join me at the podium for certificates.
Thank you so much for joining us here this evening and for the representation your team has done on behalf of the City of Barrie and obviously accomplished great things. You can't tell by the physique you're looking at right now, but I was once a soccer player, and it's certainly great to see the work that's been done. So I would like to ask you to say a few words on behalf of your team before we continue.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to thank Council and the Mayor for having the girls come down here. It was a great year we had. The U16 Barrie Soccer Club, over the past 2 years, obviously going through the pandemic, it was hard for them to train, but they persevered. We did join the Ontario Cup in 2022, not knowing if we were going to play. But the girls practiced, anticipating they were going to play, and our main goal was actually to win the Ontario Cup. And as you can see, Ava has it in her hand. Barrie took home the Ontario Cup, and can't do it without these great girls, 17 great athletes who practice 3 or 4 times a week, extra training, and represented the City of Barrie in the Ontario Cup. And also one of our other coaches, Paul, who assisted me this year, and our manager, who is the backbone, make sure we practice, and we have our hotels and our meals and our schedules, Angela. That's it. So, Annika Bosch.
We'll go over to the side here so we can do a photo right afterwards.
Livia Connolly. Charlotte Goosenap. Gabby Good.
No.
Caitlin Hall. Ava Hawes. Jenna Logus. Montana McNeil. Ava Palazzo. Emily Rempel. Emma Santera. Ashley Small. Lindsay Stevenson. Stevens. Brenna Stevenson. Jordan Watson. Ella Chapman. Brianna Pelleggi. Angela Santera. And Paul.
Congratulations, Coach. And do we want to do the photo here? Wendy? Is it perfect?
Can we?
Right here. So,
Same as outside. Same as outside. Same as outside.
Why doesn't the back row stand on the above onto where you're sitting? Because you can't see when you're kneeled. No. Yeah. And then just stand.
my normal height.
Why don't you give the cup something back? You guys want to hold back? It's going to be up high.
job, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Much appreciate it.
So, Coach Plagge and team, I just want to thank you because that's the first time I've ever had my picture taken as part of a winning team. So that was fantastic. We're actually not going to... Okay, besides with you folks. Okay, that's besides with you folks. I just want to take a moment, a break. I'm going to let the folks who've been here for the presentations leave. There's some exciting stuff here tonight, but I'm sure you have better things to do than listen to us. So if you want to take the opportunity to leave right now, you certainly can, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. All right, members of council, will now proceed with our council meeting. We're going to move on past reports from officers as there are none to deputations. There's one emergency deputation request from Christy Inglis regarding motion 22-P-053 concerning a zoning bylaw amendment application for 129 Collier Street, Ward 2. As the deputation request was received after the printing of the agenda, a vote in the favor by the majority of councils required in order for emergency deputation to proceed. All those in favor on my right and on my left? It is approved, so I'll invite Christy up to make the deputation.
Thank you very much for taking the time and hearing what I have to say. The reason for me speaking today, I'll give you a little background. I've owned the property directly adjacent to the proposed development since 2014. At my property, I operate my business, and I also provide 4 other commercial offices at very affordable rates. All 5 of us operate our own businesses without staff. I am very much in favor of this development. The only bylaw amendment that I am opposed to is the reduction of parking requirement from 1 spot per unit to 0.85 spots per unit. Since owning this property in 2014, the elimination of free parking on Barrie Street between Collier and Eugenia has been eliminated. The north side of the street, where there used to be permit parking, is now metered parking. The south side of the street, where my front door is, used to be free on-street parking, and now it is also metered parking. All 3 of these things over the past 8 years has changed my ability to operate business, and I've accommodated since then and made changes to our scheduling, how many staff members we have, how many offices I rent. So we've rolled with it. However, it has already impacted my business. With each, I fear now if the large apartment building directly next to my office is allowed to have the bylaw amendment with less parking, it is going to severely impact my ability to operate mine and the other 4 businesses that operate out of my small building. We've survived the pandemic, all 5 of us, and I would like to survive further in Barrie. and still be able to offer commercial space at reasonable rates. So that is the only amendment that I am strongly opposed to. The rest, I'm happy to have that lovely apartment building next door.
Thank you so much for making the deputation. Before you move on, can you just state your address and full name?
Yep.
Not required? Not required.
I can tell you anyway. Christy Ingalls. Christy Ingalls. I'm chiropractor at Barrie Family Chiropractic. And my address of the building I own is 137 Collier. The property that I'm talking about is the proposed at 129 Collier, which also has an address on Dunlop as well, that whole complex.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
for
Mayor.
coming this evening and expressing your concern.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anyone wanting to provide an emergency deputation on the reports considered at today's General Committee meeting? The matters were LCS 007-22, Structure of Committees of Council and Procedural Bylaw Updates, and the second was an item for discussion regarding the City of Barrie's Lobbyist Registry. Are there any emergency deputations being requested? As there are none, we will move on to tax applications. Deputy Mayor Thompson, do you have a motion regarding the tax applications?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Jim Harris, that the list of applications submitted to Council for cancellation, reduction, and additions of taxes dated December 14th, 2022, submitted by the Treasurer in the amount of $35,987.66 be approved.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris that the list of applications for cancellation, reduction, or additions to taxes to Council dated December 14th, 2022, submitted by the Treasurer in the amount of $35,987.66 be approved. Ms. Cook, have we received any objections to the list of applications for cancellation, reduction, or addition of taxes?
No, we have not.
Mr. Miller, have we received any objections to the list of applications for cancellation, reduction, or addition of taxes?
No, we have not.
Seeing as there are none, are there any questions or concerns from Council? With no questions or concerns, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? It's approved. We will move past communications as there's none into committee report. Deputy Mayor Thompson, I believe you have a motion.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section A of the Planning Committee report dated November 29th, 2022, as circulated, be adopted.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris that Section A of the Planning Committee report dated November 29th, 2022, as circulated, be adopted. 22-P-044 zoning bylaw amendment application for 34, 36, 38, 40, 44, and 50 Bradford Street, Barrie Central, Inc., Ward 2, and 22-P-045 site plan control requirements for processing for 10, 14, 18, 20, 22, and 24 Grove Street West in Ward 2. Are there any questions or comments from members of Council? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. Those in favor on my right and on my left? It's approved. Deputy Mayor Thompson. Sorry, Councillor Morales.
Don't you have to go first?
You're right, Councillor Morales. I was wrong.
Okay, I passed.
You passed the test. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section B of the Planning Committee report dated November 29th, 2022, as circulated, be received.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris that Section B of the Planning Committee report dated November 29th, 2022, as circulated, be received. This is in regards to 22-P-046, applications for an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 70 and 76 Edgehill Drive, Ward 4. Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nettle. I'd like to declare an indirect pecuniary interest with respect to file D30-023-2022 as one of the owners is a business partner of mine, so I won't partake in the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. Madam Clerk, has the conflict been noted?
Yes, Mayor Nettle, it has.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from members of council? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. Those in favor on my right and on my left? It carries. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section C of the Planning Committee report dated November 29th, 2022, as circulated, be received.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris that Section C of the Planning Committee report dated November 29th, 2022, as circulated, be received. This is 22-P-047, application for a temporary use bylaw, 164 Innisfil Street, Ward 2. Are there any questions or concerns from members of council? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. Those in favor on my right and on my left? It carries. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section D of the Planning Committee report dated November 29th, 2022, as circulated, be received.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris that Section D of the Planning Committee report dated November 29th, 2022, as circulated, be received. This is 22-P-048, presentation concerning the new comprehensive zoning bylaw in the City of Barrie. Any questions or comments from members of council? Seeing none, those in favor on my right and on my left? It's approved. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section A of General Committee report dated December 3rd, 2022, as circulated, be received.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section A of the General Committee report dated December 3rd, 2022, as circulated, be received. This is 22-G-170, Development of Strategic Priorities for the 2022 to 2026 term of council. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor on my right and on my left? It's approved. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
That section, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section B of the General Committee report dated December 3rd, 2022, as circulated, be received.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris. The Section B of the General Committee report dated December 3rd, 2022, as circulated, be received. This is 22-G-171, discussion of confidential education or training session, establishing conditions for success. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor on my right and on my left? Approved. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section C of the General Committee report dated December 3rd, 2022, as circulated, be.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris. The Section C of the General Committee report dated December 3rd, 2022, as circulated, be received. This is 22-G-172, Council Strategic Priorities Session 2022 to 2026. Any comments or questions? All those in favor on my right and on my left? Approved.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section D of the General Committee report dated December 3rd, 2022, as circulated, be adopted. A recorded vote.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris. The Section D of the General Committee report dated December 3rd, 2022, as circulated, be adopted. 22-G-173. This is the 2022 to 2026 Council Strategic Priorities. A recorded vote is being requested. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Nettle. I will start with Councillor Riema.
Yes.
Councillor Nixon,
Yes.
Councillor Kungle,
Yes.
Councillor Corser,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Thompson,
Yes.
Councillor Negussi,
Yes.
Councillor Harvey,
Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
Councillor Morales,
Yes.
Councillor Hamilton,
Yes.
and Mayor Nuttall.
Yes.
Carries unanimously.
Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section A of the Planning Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be adopted.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Harris. The Section A of the Planning Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be adopted. 22-P-049, this is a temporary use bylaw for 164 Innisfil Street. And 22-P-050, the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 320 Bayfield Street. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move to the vote. Those in favor on my right and on my left. It carries. Councillor Harris, your microphone there. Oops. Deputy Mayor.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section B of the Planning Committee report dated December 2nd, 2022, as circulated, be adopted.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. It's moved by the Deputy Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section B of the Planning Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be adopted. This is regarding 22-P-051 zoning bylaw amendment 969, 979, 989 Mapleview Drive East, Sandy Creek Estates, Ward 10. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, those in favor on my right and on my left. It carries unanimously.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section C of the Planning Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be adopted.
Good to go.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section C of the Planning Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be adopted. Are there any questions or comments?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that motion 22P052 of Section C of the Planning Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be amended to add the following paragraph. That Staff and Development Services report back to the Affordability Committee at a time those regulations associated with Bills 23 and 109 are passed, to advise if our process is in alignment with them or requires adjusting.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon. It's moved by Councillor Nixon and it's seconded by Councillor Harris that motion 22-P-052 of Section C of the Planning Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be amended to add the following paragraph. The Staff and Development Services report back to the Affordability Committee at the time of those regulations associated with Bills 23 and 109 are passed, to advise if our process is in alignment with them or require adjusting. Are there any questions or comments regarding the amendment? Seeing none, just before we vote, I just want to say thank you to Councillors Harris and Nixon for bringing this forward in relation to a letter we received and for being on top of this for our council. It's in line with the work that I know you're going to be doing in the Affordability Committee. Those in favor,
Sorry, can I just have one quick question?
Yes.
Just in terms of them reporting back after the regulations have passed, is that after July 1st you're asking staff to report back to the committee? Just
Through your Mayor Nuttall to Councillor Hamilton, I would just assume if the regulations come in place before that, that staff would report back at the time, but it looks like it might not be till after July 1st, so that would be when staff would report back.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, those in favor on my right and on my left? Thank you. It's approved. We'll now go to the main motion as amended. Any other questions or comments? Those in favor on my right and on my left? It is approved. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section D of the Planning Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be adopted.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris. The Section D of the Planning Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be adopted. This is concerning 22-P-053, the zoning bylaw amendment application for 129 Collier Street, Ward 2, and the item for the deputation this evening. Are there any questions or comments? I have one quick question through to members of planning staff. The requested amendment with regards to parking that was brought up at the deputation this evening, my understanding is that the new proposed official plan and eventual zoning bylaws are proposing a lower parking rate than what we've seen here as part of the application. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question, Mayor Nuttall. So the parking ratio that's proposed for this project is certainly in keeping, it's 0.85, and it is very standard with some other parking ratios that staff have recommended and council has approved in the area. And absolutely, you're right in terms of the work that we're doing on the new zoning bylaw and as it relates to parking. Overall, we are going to see a lower parking ratio going forward in most areas of the municipality.
Are there any other questions or comments? Before we do, I think it's important to recognize the time that was taken by, I apologize for your last name, remember Chris to use your first name. And it's an item that I think we're going to see more and more in terms of the downtown as we see increased development and at the same time lower parking ratios or rates. It's going to be something that we see more and more. And so I know there's going to be, oftentimes there's going to be competing interests when it comes to this. And we will do our best to get it right going forward. I assure you what you've said tonight hasn't gone on deaf ears. And we'll certainly take a look at that as we work through all of the parking for different proposals that are coming forward and also our own strategies with parking downtown. You mentioned a few items that had changed over the years, and I know that we'll be having a conversation about that after tonight's meeting and what you've brought up. So thank you for bringing that here this evening.
Sorry, just a quick question through you, Mayor Nuttall, if we can. Will there be some sort of impact assessment of these, as you've said, that previous developments as well have lowered the parking? Is there an assessment being done on businesses as we're trying to encourage businesses downtown and people to be going downtown, to be utilizing businesses? Are we looking at the impact of less parking on businesses in the downtown vicinity?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Hamilton. So there's two different departments that look at parking in the municipality. So one ties into myself and the review of parking applications, development applications, and then through our team in transit and parking, they look at the broader city parking strategy. That I'm not sure if Ms. Rebecca James Reed might want to talk a bit more about that. But we absolutely look at parking comprehensively, but there's still two of us two sections that look at it.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Hamilton. Actually, I would just invite Brent Forsyth, who's on the Zoom call, to join the call because he's prepared to answer the question.
Mr. Forsyth?
Good evening, members of council. Sorry, can you hear me?
We can now, yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay. Yes, thanks for the question through Mayor Nuttall to Councillor Hamilton. Yes, we look at the parking supply in the downtown, and when we work closely with Ms. Banfield's department, and as part of the strategy, we actually calculate what the what we're anticipating kind of the supply and demand to be in the downtown to ensure that we have enough parking to supply where we think the future is going to be in the downtown. And as part of our last parking strategy update, which was presented to council in 2020, we did highlight the need to retain our municipal parking supply in order to support the growth of the downtown, because we know this type of decisions are going to be made through the development process, where there's going to be more reliance on the municipal parking system. So that is embedded in our strategy as we move forward.
Sorry, can I just clarify then? So for the downtown, you're saying that that's sort of an exception to the rule and that we want to ensure that we're maintaining sufficient parking down there, as opposed to other areas of the cities where perhaps we are approving the 85 or 0.85 as opposed to one spot? Does that make sense? Like, I'm just a bit confused, because when we're doing the rezoning, it looks like we're moving towards less parking. But then I think I just heard that in the downtown core, we're actually trying to maintain the parking infrastructure.
So I'll let it go to Ms. James Reed. Just before that, I think what you're hearing is there's two separate pieces. The one piece is the municipally owned lots, municipally run regulated parking along road fronts, and then the second piece is with Ms. Banfield in terms of the developments that are coming forward, the reduction of the actual required spaces per unit. But I'll pass it off.
Thank you. That clarifies for me. Yeah,
okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Nixon.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Mr. Forsyth, I guess, or Ms. James Reed, either one. On a new development where you have, just so I get my head around this, say a unit proposed to be built with, for round numbers, 100 units in it. So does that mean that development, the standard will now be, we are allowing 85 parking spaces for that unit, or for that development?
Ms. Banfield.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Nixon, that's what the parking ratio works out to, yes, in this, if it's 100 units. And really what that ends up being is that some units then won't have their individual parking spaces. Again, we are seeing it in projects across the city where time and time again, through not only the applications before us, but through the parking justification studies, that there is the ability to be able to justify that not every single unit is going to have its own parking space.
Thank you. Is that based on studies where a lot of developments, there's just simply 85% of the people don't have, or 15% of the people don't have vehicles, or some people have two vehicles, or if you don't buy early, then I guess you don't get a parking spot in the building? Is that kind of how that works out?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Nixon, absolutely. That's how the expression is unbundling your parking. So you might be able to purchase a unit in the building, but you wouldn't purchase parking. Or you might purchase two, but correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Question for Ms. James Reed or Mr. Forsyth. Based on the deputation, could we enhance signage on the Collier Mulcaster Public Parkade side? So if there's any concerns in the future, again, it's hard to predict, but if there's any concerns where there's restricted on-street parking, they're driving around, they're trying to find a parking spot to go to the deputy's business or any other business, that there's a nice shiny sign better enhanced as to what there is right now, so people know that they can take advantage of the paid parking inside the, I don't know what to call that structure, that block. Could we do that?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Morales. We certainly can look at that. Thank you for the suggestion.
Okay, perfect. And I'll just close off by saying, quick comment, I'll be supportive of the parking reduction as proposed by staff. I think we got to build our downtown up. and we got to build it for people, not cars. The reality is some seniors don't have cars. Some seniors have one car. Some seniors share a car. Funny enough, I was actually in Ward 9 today dropping off some Christmas cards, and I was actually talking to a resident I trust a lot, and she's saying that the number of seniors that are selling off their cars is going up. And this isn't something they found. So I actually found kind of an empty parkade that they have. And very timely with Bill 23, parking requirements are one of the things that kill in residential projects, especially in downtowns. So while congestion is important, while we can't just ignore this, it's uncomfortable conversations like this where we have to realize where's that delicate balance between people, cars, and taking a lot that's been empty for how many decades, and the percentage before as proposed by staff for myself is comfortable.
Thank you, Councilor Morales. Are there any other questions or comments? With that, just before we call the vote, as we have these applications come around the city, there's certainly going to be some concern around them, but it is in the downtown, as Councilor Morales was just saying, we're going to have more and more of this. And if we're going to have 15% of people without vehicles, we need to have a grocery store downtown. It's a absolute must. I'll leave that there, and I know that we'll all work towards that, and I know that Councillor Nixon has brought that up a number of times already. All those in favor on my right and on my left? It's approved. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section A of the General Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be adopted.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris that Section A of the General Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be adopted. 22-G-174, Country Lane, no parking any time. 22-G-175, surplusing of city-owned property, 145 Loon Avenue. 22-G-176, 2022 community donation, Honeyfield Communities, Inc. 22-G-177, pending list update, and 22-G-178 of Downtown Barrie Business Association Board of Directors appointments. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor on my right and on my left? Approved. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section B of the General Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be received.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris that Section B of the General Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be received. This is 22-G-179, the presentation concerning the 101 on corporate asset management. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, those in favor on my right and on my left? It's approved. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section C of the General Committee report this dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be adopted.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris that Section C of the General Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be adopted. 22-G-180, expropriation, Yonge Street Row expansion, Mapleview to Lockhart. Any comments or questions on my left? My right? Those in favor on my right? And my left? It's approved. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section D of the General Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be adopted.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris to Section D of the General Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be adopted. This is 22-G-181, procedural bylaw changes. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, those in favor on my right and on my left? It's approved. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that Section E of the General Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be adopted.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris to Section E of the General Committee report dated December 7th, 2022, as circulated, be adopted. This is 22-G-182, correspondence from circulation list dated December 7th, 2022 regarding Bill 23. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, those in favor on my right and on my left, it's approved. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, second by Councillor Harris, that Section A of the General Committee Report dated December 14, 2022, as circulated, be adopted.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris that Section A of the General Committee Report dated December 14, 2022, as circulated, be adopted. This is 22-G-183, City of Barrie Lobbyist Registry. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, those in favor on my right and on my left, it's approved. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, second by Councillor Harris, that Section B of the General Committee Report dated December 14, 2022, as circulated, be adopted.
I jumped the gun there, Madam Clerk. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris that Section B of the General Committee Report dated December 14, 2022, as circulated, be adopted. This is 22-G-184, Structure of Committees of Council and Procedural Bylaw Updates. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, those in favor on my right and on my left, it's approved. As there is no deferred business, we'll move to direct motions. I believe we have a motion without notice, Deputy Mayor Thompson.
That pursuant to Section 7.1 of the Procedural Bylaw 2019-100, permission be granted to introduce a motion without notice concerning a congratulations to the Warden and Deputy Warden of the County of SIMCOE.
Councillor Harris. Nothing, no, it's okay. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and it's seconded by myself that a motion without notice, congratulations to the Warden and Deputy Warden for the County of SIMCOE, that pursuant to Section 7.1 of the Procedural Bylaw 2019-100, permission be granted to introduce a motion without notice concerning the congratulations to the Warden and Deputy Warden for the County of SIMCOE. This requires a 2/3 majority. All of those in favor on my right and my left, it's approved. Deputy Mayor.
Congratulations to the Warden and the Deputy Warden of SIMCOE, of the County of SIMCOE.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by myself. The congratulations to the Warden and Deputy Warden for the County of SIMCOE. To read it out, that the City of Barrie extends congratulations to Mayor Basil Clark of the Town of Romero on being elected as the new County of SIMCOE Warden, and to Mayor Jennifer Coughlin of Springwater Township on being elected as the Simcoe County Deputy Warden. Are there any questions or comments? Just before we do, I'll just say congratulations. These are both wonderful individuals who've worked in their respective municipalities, but also at the county level for quite a long time, and it's great to see this election take place. All those in favor on my right and on my left, it carries. Presentations. There's one presentation this evening by representatives of the County of Simcoe concerning the property located at 20 Rose Street. I would like to call upon Greg Bishop, General Manager, Social and Community Services Division, and representatives from the County of Simcoe to the podium for the presentation. Welcome to the City of Barrie. I hope you'll take our congratulations back to the Warden and Deputy Warden.
Absolutely, and thank you very much. I'm sure they'll appreciate it, and we're very pleased as well. And congratulations to everyone here, both re-elected and new council. So I have a clicker, thank you, and I promised Dawn I'll leave it here. My name's Greg Bishop. As the Mayor indicated, I'm the General Manager of Social and Community Services.
Sorry, just before you continue, could we turn up the volume at all for those who are in the gallery, I think is what I'm hearing requested. Can we try that again, please, Greg, if that's okay?
Sure. So can you hear me now? Is that okay?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. So thank you for the invitation to present tonight at City Council. Appreciate the opportunity. We will be presenting on, specifically we'll talk about homelessness prevention services and supports, but I understand that there's an interest in knowing more about plans for the Rose Street property in the city of Barrie, and so that's what we'll focus on. But recognizing there are some new council members, we'll provide some context and background as well. So just quickly, we'll walk through during the presentation, and with me I should mention, I think I started to mention it before the volume was adjusted. So Wendy Hembrough is our Director of Community Programs, and she will be joining me in the presentation. So we're going to walk through the background, the county as service system manager designated by the province and what that means, homelessness prevention services and supports throughout the county, and what the county funds with respect to the City of Barrie services. And then, of course, some of the impacts during the COVID-19 pandemic and some of the approaches taken to ensure that there was safety for both individuals needing shelter, but also staff working in the shelter system. We'll also touch on system capacity in terms of how many shelter beds are existing in the system, and how we've been able to expand some of that, and also some future opportunities. We'll also talk, as I said, about the Rose Street piece, both currently as a temporary emergency homeless shelter as a response to the pandemic and the increased number of individuals seeking shelter, but also the future of the Rose Street site and what it was purchased for by the county in terms of intent, and that is for an affordable housing development. And then also we have a comprehensive service system review of our homelessness system that began, I believe, a couple months ago, and through a procurement process we have a consultant hired to review the entire system and seek ways that we can find some synergies. And then, of course, we'll also talk about supportive housing opportunities. So this is where I'll need my glasses, pardon me. The county, as the service system manager, is responsible for a few things: social housing system management, direct delivery of community housing, that would be the SIMCOE County Housing Corporation, funding administration and insurance compliance of the housing system, which is a number of nonprofit providers throughout the county, including the cities of Barrie and Orillia. We also deliver Ontario Works, licensed child care system management, child care fee subsidy, as well as homelessness prevention services and supports, which we'll talk about tonight. That doesn't cover the other pieces, which are very obvious too, in terms of county services to the cities of Barrie and Orillia, and that includes paramedic services, as you're well aware. But we're going to focus on the social community services piece. So a couple items I'll just mention with respect to homelessness system. We are designated by the province as one of 47 municipal service managers. And what that means is we're delivering those services under largely provincial and in some cases federal funding, as well as some municipal cost sharing on some of the programs. It's not the same throughout all the programs. It's a little complicated in some cases, but predominantly the program delivery funds are provided by the province, and the administration is generally cost shared provincially and with the municipalities through a service agreement with the cities. There are two areas that will be meaningful with respect to tonight's presentation, and that is the homeless enumeration, and as well the coordinated access system. So we are required to do a homeless enumeration on a regular basis every 2 years by the province, and we did we were able to do that despite the pandemic. And I'll just mention that the most recent enumeration took place in January of this year, and 722 individuals were counted as homeless in Simcoe County, with 50% residing in the city of Barrie. And then, of course, followed by North SIMCOE was the next highest, and then Aurelia. That did represent an increase of 159 new individuals since the enumeration was completed in 2020. There's also coordinated access that we're required to provide through the province, and it's a community-wide strategy to help prevent homelessness and match individuals and families experiencing homelessness to housing and support resources. It's important to mention that we really are looking at opportunities to divert from homeless shelters to really help ensure that individuals are attached to services where possible, and really a focus on housing stability when we can. I'll just turn it to Wendy to talk a bit more about the homeless system in more specific detail, and then, of course, the shelter.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor Nuttall and members of council. I'm Wendy Hembrough. As Greg has shared, I'm the Director of Community Programs with the county, and my portfolio includes homelessness system management, as well as our local immigration partnership and our poverty reduction initiatives. So, as Greg has mentioned, the supports and services related to homelessness prevention initiatives are varied. This slide demonstrates that there are a range of interventions along the housing continuum, with emergency shelter being defined by provincial funding guidelines as the very first step on that continuum. Funding to the system is predominantly federal and provincial, and of course those funding envelopes are administered by the county. Very quickly, if I could, I would like to run through at a high level, each of the areas that are noted on the screen. The Housing Retention Program is a range of financial benefits to assist individuals to retain or obtain housing. This is directly delivered by the County of SIMCOE. We also fund a regionalized Housing First program, which we contract to empower SIMCOE. And this includes rent supplements with intensive case management, supports for individuals moving from homelessness into housing. We also fund the homeless shelters in the system, 4 of which are in the city of Barrie: the Salvation Army Bayside Mission, the Busby Centre, Youth Haven, and the Elizabeth Fry Society of Simcoe County. In addition, as a part of the housing continuum, there are also funded transitional housing programs, and there are 3 in the city of Barrie: Redwood Park Communities, Samaritan House, and Youth Haven. In addition, another option to serve the unique needs of homeless individuals includes a funded domiciliary care program. And domiciliary care is for individuals who require supports with the activities of daily living. And these contracts are funded on a per diem basis. And in the city of Barrie, there are 2 funded programs, one at Simcoe Terrace and Windermere Gardens. Additionally, the housing resource centers exist in communities across the county, with a housing resource center here in the city of Barrie. And again, that is a regional contract to empower SIMCOE, with Contact providing the services in the southern part of the county. Supportive housing programs, there are 3 in the county, 2 in the city of Barrie. One is Lucy's Place on Essa Road, which recently had an expansion from 18 to 24 units. And then one upcoming on Tiffin Street, which will be opening in the first quarter of 2023, that will provide 14 units of supportive housing. Another important element to the range of services and supports within the homelessness prevention system is outreach. There are 4 funded outreach programs in the county of Simcoe, and 1 here in the city of Barrie. That is offered by the Busby Centre. And then Youth Haven, of course, housed here in the city of Barrie, offers a regional youth outreach program as well. Very briefly, as I know Mr. Bishop referenced it a moment ago, the folks I'm sure are familiar with the period of time where there was a temporary motel model of shelter that was implemented. This model was implemented specifically and directly to protect vulnerable individuals and comply with public health requirements throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. At the height of that model in the city of Barrie, there were close to 200 individuals that were accessing that temporary motel shelter. 5 of the 6 funded shelters in the county moved to that model. The Salvation Army in the city of Barrie did not. They were able to manage within their own environment due to the setup of that environment. The funding for that particular model was federal and provincial pandemic-specific funding, which sustained the model throughout the duration. And in May 2022, when the end of capacity limits in congregate settings were identified by public health, we were able to work with our funded system in order to transition individuals back into regular shelter settings. The model did close on July the 31st of this year. There were some takeaways from the model and some best practices that were established, including the integration of community paramedicine into those sites, as well as our regularly funded shelter programs, as well as the integration of community-based supports, including mental health and addiction services, as well as housing services through our regional funded provider. An additional best practice was the integration of county staff through a realignment of staff during the wind down of the model to staff in shelter settings to facilitate system navigation, access to financial benefits, and to connect individuals with the necessary external community-based supports. And from those relationships and practices, relationships have been strengthened and have really informed ongoing system management. And although the model served its purpose, it was financially unsustainable when those federal and provincial funding envelopes came to an end. Leading up to the closure of the temporary motel model, and as I mentioned, through the Alignment of Ontario Works staff, close to 76% of the individuals that were in the temporary motel shelter model in the city of Barrie were supported to access other options, ranging from emergency homeless shelters to permanent housing to reconnecting with family supports to repatriation to home communities where appropriate. These solution-focused interventions boosted opportunities for shelter participants and demonstrated the critical importance for connecting and keeping people connected to external community-based supports appropriate to their specific needs. In working to secure an alternate location for temporary overnight sheltering to address the anticipated need for overnight shelter beds in the city of Barrie beyond the regularly funded capacity of shelters, we worked in very, very close relationships with our colleagues at the city of Barrie in various departments, and after an exhaustive search of possibilities for an alternate secondary site, including spaces such as church auditoriums, which were graciously offered by our faith communities, we were unable to successfully secure a location due to building code and related fire code requirements specific to not allowing sleeping in non-residential built facilities. So county staff continued to work with City of Barrie staff and within our own resources, and we identified a vacant duplex from the county's scattered unit inventory, worked collaboratively with City of Barrie staff to enable use of this location in accordance with planning and zoning requirements, and through existing county administered funding envelopes under Reaching Home and Social Services Relief Funding, assisted the shelters in increasing 11 beds for the Elizabeth Fry Society, 20 for the Busby Centre, an additional 10 at this temporary site for an increase of 41 beds to the system. Additionally, as an intervention recognizing the pressures within the homeless system, Housing First rent supplements were increased from $600 a month to $800 a month earlier this year. And each day, to inform shelter bed availability, the number of beds available is communicated with all of our funded shelter providers. There are 225 beds in the regularly funded system across the county, 152 regularly funded beds in the city of Barrie. And bed availability does vary from day to day, as I'm sure you can appreciate, and those unoccupied beds, as well as are communicated to our funded shelter providers as well to help maximize use of those beds within the system. The 20 Rose Street temporary shelter facility, the property at 20 Rose Street was purchased in 2021 by the County of Simcoe. It's a 4.7 acre site, as I'm sure you're familiar. And as Greg mentioned, it was for the purposes of future affordable housing development and a social service hub, which is in the pre-development phase, pre-development county council approvals phase. Through a county council approved contribution of $800,000 and a motion received from the city of Barrie to council to contribute $400,000, county staff were directed to work with motel-based shelter providers toward transitioning out of the COVID motel sheltering model toward shelter solutions that were more appropriate to meet the needs of individuals at this time. The 20 Rose Street temporary facility acquisition process included a very public procurement process, and a vendor was selected. It is 720 Solutions is the vendor that was selected for the project. The site is owned by the County of Simcoe, and the operator for this temporary facility will be the Busby Centre. We had reached out to all of our funded shelter providers in the city of Barrie, and capacity, as you are aware, with all of our shelters in terms of staffing and other factors is a challenge. The Busby Centre has come forward, and they will be the operator for the shelter. The operating hours will be from early evening until mid-morning. It is an overnight model. And there will be integrated priority supports on site, including addiction, mental health, physical health, system navigation, resource and referral, and access to financial benefits as appropriate through our Ontario Works team. The critical piece when we were working at developing this interim model was to maintain a critical connection to existing community-based services while providing warm, safe overnight shelter from the winter elements. We have procured security for the site for periodic site checks during non-operational hours, and there will be on-site security for the full operating hours from early evening until mid-morning. And during those daytime hours, there will also be a staff from the Busby Centre on site who will work with anyone who is arriving to the location to redirect to regular funded supports within the city of Barrie, including such items as our drop-in day services that are funded through the Busby Centre, as well as the community meals program through the Salvation Army. These programs are available as a part of the regularly funded system, and as noted, it was an identified important factor to continue to keep people attached to those community-based supports. And I will turn things back over to you, Greg.
Thanks, Wendy. So as Wendy indicated, there's a number of partnerships that certainly we had prior to the pandemic, but have enhanced and I would suggest deepened during the pandemic. Partnerships are really key, and complex issues and challenges and ensuring the services are maximized in terms of capacity is really critical. And so involving many players is so important. This is just a screen that provides some of the examples of the different partners and players that we're working with, us as the system manager at the county level, but also certainly the service providers to really wrap around and support individuals who were unsheltered during the pandemic, and also in this new model in terms of the development on a temporary basis. And many best practices, I believe, have been born from this many new relationships. So certainly, as we mentioned earlier, the City of Barrie, the local shelter system, other levels of the government, we did receive federal and provincial COVID-related dollars, which were one-time in nature. And I'll talk in a moment about some of those opportunities. And certainly also the community partners and stakeholders, the emergency services, some of the agencies related to the SIMCOE County Alliance to End Homelessness. 2-in-1 is a really strong partner on many of much of the work that we do in social services, and then of course CMHA and local faith communities. In terms of winter warming, we wanted to include some information on that because we thought it might be of interest, and I know it has come up in the past. With direction from County Council, we did do a procurement process to a number of communities throughout Simcoe County, including Barrie. We had some dollars through the SSRF, the Social Services Relief Fund, the provincial funding to support warming programming or opportunities. What I should mention there is our regular homeless service dollars that we receive in terms of on an annual basis. We're not permitted to use those dollars for warming centers. The province has indicated in its guidelines that the gateway into the service system for homelessness supports is generally through shelters, and to avoid duplicate shelter systems and that kind of thing. That's I believe where their the rationale comes from. What is really well known though is that there's many needs for some individuals who may not be able to or are not ready to access the shelter system. And so through a number of community-based initiatives over the years, there have been warming center activities that were born through local efforts. This year, we did award funding through that SSRF funding to the John Howard Society. It's located at the Collier Street United. They'll be providing warming, and it'll be triggered through temperature when it gets below, I believe, minus 15. And there will be services at the warming center in terms of trying to connect individuals to supports. There's also 2-in-1. I wanted to provide a plug for 2-in-1. They are really an essential gateway really to accessing services for many individuals. So if you're asked by a constituent or anyone around how do I help individuals or how do I connect people to supports, 2-in-1 is a really great resource. And I think if you could go to the next slide, there we go, thank you. Back one. So I wanted to talk about 20 Rose Street and the actual future intended use of that site when County Council approved the purchase from the province of Ontario, which was the OPP location. It was to include an affordable housing development, and it still is planned. 150 units at a minimum. There would be some early stages. Council did approve us to go ahead with pre-development planning. We would go back to Council certainly with more detail around costing once that pre-work is completed. And if approved, construction could begin as early as spring of 2024. We would be including a social services hub similar to what we've done in Aurelia. It's underway right now. That would include Ontario Works, Children's Services. In Aurelia, we have a child care center. We would look into that opportunity as well. And a bit of a hub opportunity, and also a great mix of a number of different unit sizes for that property. This picture just shows a few of the developments that have occurred in recent years throughout the county. And sorry, thank you. In terms of next steps, we did mention that there will be a review of the homelessness prevention system. We have engaged a consultant, and they've done a really extensive, and they're in the middle of that, I think. It's almost winding down, around engaging a number of stakeholders for their input. and we will be informing recommendations and taking those recommendations, or reviewing the recommendations, and then taking something to County Council in the first quarter of this next year. We'll also be streamlining this system to align with the Housing First approach, and that will be really leveraging a coordinated access system. So that's where all the partners are working together, inputting data into what's called a HIFIS electronic database system, and ensuring that individuals are really connected and we're not providing duplication of services, but we're really helping to do a warm wraparound support. There will also be some really outcomes-driven performance measurement, and that certainly was of interest to County Council when we did the procurement. So I would just talk about maybe next steps too. There's also I did talk about the Rose Street affordable housing, but there's also supportive housing on Tiffin Street that will be opening early next year as well. We were able to leverage some provincial dollars for supportive housing capital, and we'll be also using operating for that program. Certainly we would like to look at any opportunities, and staff have been directed to do that, where there is an ability to create supportive housing in addition to the regular full sphere of affordable housing. Unfortunately, right now we don't have regular ongoing programs related to creating supportive housing. We have had a couple opportunities from the province in the past, and that's where Lucy's Place came from, and also the Tiffin Street. So we'll certainly keep at it with our colleagues at the province. So that concludes the presentation, but certainly, Mayor Nuttall, turn it back to you for any questions.
Thank you, and thank you to councillors and members of the public for the indulgence on that longer than our bylaw states, but I think it's an important subject matter that we did this evening. Councillor Nixon, I think that you had indicated earlier on that you'd like to ask some questions.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Mr. Bishop. Again, thank you very much for you and Wendy coming out and giving us a little more information on this project. I do have a couple of questions. Do we have a date yet of when this will be open? I know originally we were looking several weeks ago, and then obviously it got backed up a bit. How close are we?
Well, we're getting very close. Obviously, it requires a number of things that are not fully within our control, but we are engaging. We're really close. There's the last two pieces. Electrical Safety Authority is coming to do an inspection shortly. All of the providers have been really recognizing the priority and the direction received to make this a priority. Mm-hmm. We are anticipating submitting an application for occupancy hopefully tomorrow afternoon. If not, it'll be Friday morning. Our colleague, the Director of Social Housing, was also going to join us today, Brad Spiewak. He is actually on site. He's been on site throughout the weekend and most evenings, and just sent me a picture that they had the light standards up and running tonight, and they're just working through some final pieces.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Just one other thing, well, maybe a couple other things. My understanding, and I believe you made it clear, but just so we're all on the same page, the initial temporary facility will be evening only, is that correct? Where it'll be open from, say, 7 in the evening until a certain time in the morning, and then at that point, the people staying there, are they transported to Busby or Salvation Army? Is there a way for them to get back and forth to stay out of the cold in the daytime?
We'll be working with the service providers as long as individuals wish to access that service, or if they're going somewhere else. They may have a number of different appointments or things that they would wish to do, but certainly there would be a connection through the outreach services, through the contract that we have with Busby.
Okay, thank you. And again, thank you for coming. Obviously, this is a situation that it's a little contentious in certain parts of the city, and there's some neighbors in in the neighborhood who certainly have some concerns. Hopefully you answered some of those questions tonight. If not, you may you may be hearing from some now that they may have some more questions after this evening, and I just thank you for responding to them. And we will. Not everyone agrees on everything, but I think we all agree that this is going to save lives, and it's very important. It's getting cold out there, and it's definitely necessary. And hopefully, come tomorrow, we get that signed, and people will be able to stay warm. So,
Mayor Nuttall, sorry, could I add to my response? I just think it might be helpful for the councillor, and I missed a piece. I think it's important to note this, and it might be for the residents as well, that this is to really augment the existing shelter system and enhance that capacity. So as Wendy indicated, on most nights we are receiving regular data, and if the shelter system's full in Barrie, they're out there working with other shelters throughout the county, and certainly looking to maximize those spaces first. There are some unique circumstances where individuals cannot always be accommodated, and we also have a motel community-based shelter voucher system. It's not like the motel model of the pandemic, but it is something we can use in extenuating circumstances such as families or that kind of thing. Thank you, Mayor Nuttall, for the additional opportunity.
Thank you, and I see there are 3 or 4 here that would like to ask questions. 5, make that. Councillor Corser, I have you already. I'm actually going to jump in and ask some questions here. And I'd asked all of our staff to invite members of Simcoe County staff for a couple of reasons. I think that, first of all, there's something that I heard at the door quite often when I was in the area around the temporary shelter site, which is a proposed affordable housing project going forward. And there wasn't a lot of information that I could find. And so that was, in speaking with Councillor Nixon, was, I think, something that we need to sort of get the information out there. Before I ask a question, I do want to say something up front regarding this. The service you provide is incredibly important. But so is the need to communicate with the public. And it's important as we move forward that there is an open dialogue and communication that's happening with the residents in the area. And I don't think that literally on the eve of the opening is the right time to be speaking with the public about it. I think it's something that needs to happen much further in advance. In the presentation this evening, there was a couple of words that were used: intended, could, should. And I know you won't be able to give the answer this evening, so I'm not asking for that. But I think that is, when we're talking about the communication going forward, if you could please provide members of the public with definitive timelines, that this is a temporary use, there's going to be an affordable housing component there. It could start in 2024. It's intended to be a 2022-23 item. If we can provide more definitive information to the public going forward, I know that will certainly help provide some stability in the area of this very important service. In terms of the connection, is there a defined? Could you define what that means in terms of connection from the shelter to the services that are in the downtown?
Sure. If I could start, we have received a one-time funding allocation from both the city and the county to support this initiative on a temporary basis. So we are really needing to maximize the existing system first. There's not sufficient funding to have parallel systems. If things changed in terms of need, we would certainly go back to county council around that. And I'll just ask Wendy to speak to more specifics around your question. I can also provide information around the communication, but your point is well taken.
Thank you. And just to add to that a little bit, if I may, from Mr. Bishop, is certainly the existing services in the downtown core with the Busby Centre, their day programming, the Salvation Army services, and certainly not to eliminate Elizabeth Fry or Youth Haven, but specifically for this population that Busby Centre is going to be serving. They have an outreach service that is funded. We have augmented the number of beds and the number of hours that the Busby Centre operates. The typical or pre-pandemic hours of operation were nights from kind of mid-November until April, and then day services for the balance of the year and the balance of the time. So we've worked with the Busby Centre to augment their level of service in order to accommodate the need in the community. With respect to your question, Mayor Nuttall, and please excuse me if it wasn't yours, I believe it was yours, around the transportation. Certainly, as Mr. Bishop indicated, one of the pieces that our Ontario Works teams that are specific to shelters will help folks navigate will be access to financial benefits for such things as bus passes, for example, as well as we will be working with the Busby Centre on the outreach level to determine what level of support an individual may require to go from point A to point B. So,
thank you. I have a couple more questions, and then it's going to go to members of council. With regards to the school board, was there any stakeholder outreach? Like, if there wasn't a public consultation process, was there stakeholder outreach to the school board that occurred when looking at the site?
No, Mayor Nuttall, there was not. Staff were directed from County Council to look at options and to augment the support of the wind down of the motel model following the motion from Barrie City Council.
So when there is a more permanent location being looked at, was that something that would occur?
If I could clarify, we're not looking at creating another permanent emergency shelter. Certainly, maybe the review may provide some recommendations that we would take to council, and if I don't want to presuppose that there may be some items in that could recommend that, but I think it's important right now to assess the need as we all return to more of a recovered state. I know recovery is really probably the most challenging for the most vulnerable residents, and we recognize that. But really to understand what the need is in the system might take some time.
Good point taken. Thank you. I'm gonna stop there, and I just want to remind members of council the questions, if we can tie them to the subject matter that was proposed in the agenda, which is 20 Rose Street, rather than the broader presentation that was brought forward. I'm going to go to Councillor Kungle first.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Nuttall, to GM Bishop and Wendy. Thank you for bringing this information forward. I know that was quite an emergency request on our end, so thank you for servicing a request from us in short order. I do have some questions specific to, I think, more around the scope that you've provided around what is funded from an overnight accommodation. But I've got questions resonating from constituents more around what we can expect to see or feel or how to support with respects to 20 Rose Street when we have 50 individuals occupying, but they are exiting, I'll call it the modular facility, in the morning. And so I was hoping you could clarify for me in case I'm not understanding. While Busby is identified to have some capacity to support day programming, the information I have at hand that may not be accurate is 15 people. And so in addition to then the outreach bus and service, I'm actually seeing we've got kind of an evening backup between the John Howard Society, the overnight accommodation at 20 Rose Street, but from, and I'm sure you appreciate perspectives we have around the table. So 20 Rose Street, it boundaries in an interesting way in an intersection between wards 2, 3, and 4. And so typically, historically, we've gotten a lot of questions from residents around how people move and are supported within proximity to 20 Rose Street and or the intersection of Bayfield and Dunlop and area. How do you feel confident that there is sufficient capacity during the day through Busby and others to support what I'm assuming to be is 50 individuals just from Rose Street, not even the other, I think, 143, to find appropriate accommodation during the day?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall. I think it's really important if I could share this information. It's up to 50 people. That's the capacity we have. We were hearing and observing, certainly as Wendy indicated, higher numbers during the pandemic. What I'd like to share with you is that, and we have regular meetings with the shelter providers. Wendy had one again this morning, and some other service providers. And we also have, through our federal electronic system that all providers input information into on a daily basis, we have been consistently, there has been shelter capacity for the majority of the nights this fall and as recently as Monday. So I'm not, it's too early to understand whether there'll be an influx of up to 50 people right away, and certainly we would reassess if we needed to, but at this point I think it's important to see what the need will be, and we are certainly funding operations of it, but encouraging the existing capacity to be utilized first where possible.
Okay.
Is that? Yeah.
It's helpful, if I may follow up. Are there certain service providers you can identify that the public would know are kind of connected? So hypothetically, if it's, up to 15 or 15 to 50 people at 20 Rose Street, so we'll focus in on that capacity. But if Busby is already at capacity with 15 people during the day, where is there confidence, or is there anything you can communicate about other support service agencies that are already a part of the table of conversations to say, we can embrace these individuals, or we can, as Wendy, I think you were commenting about, doing all those important steps that support individuals to take the next step, from financial support to getting your ID, to connecting a bit about next steps or any other types of support services. So how are those individuals moving into a warm handoff, I'll call it?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Kunkel. And the part of the work that we do as system manager is we have really increased this throughout the course of the pandemic, because we met with our funded shelter providers on a weekly basis. We have not abandoned that process, and more recently been meeting every 2 weeks in order to continue to have system conversations. With respect to the unique needs of individuals, that is part of the intent around those integrated on-site supports, to identify exactly what agencies, what services are specifically important to each individual. So in some cases it may be that individual is helped to connect with the John Howard Society, for example, or it may be another individual is helped to connect over to Empower SIMCOE. But in terms of those integrated supports, that is the intent of having those on site. And as Greg has mentioned, knowing that at this point we anticipate the need for those additional overnight beds in the city of Barrie, most certainly. What we don't know yet until the use begins is what those numbers look like, and we are always working with our system to really identify, do we need to make changes? Do shifts need to happen in the system? Are there other systems that need to be leveraged in order to more effectively serve populations of individuals that we encounter through our system? So to answer your question specifically, it really will be about the needs of each unique individual. Right now, folks are accessing those services and will continue to access those services even when they spend the evening through till mid-morning at the 20 Rose Street site. So keeping people connected in is really, really critical. And we will continue to evaluate that with our provider as we move through the next few months, for sure.
Thank you. And last question, because I at least will say I did see a public media release that did talk a bit about the scope of it, but then kind of a contact around who to call if there are questions. Is there any change for the public or residents here tonight, or those around what we're going to see once individuals start moving into the neighborhood, around then, what you might notice in the neighborhood, what you might change. But in general, if you've got questions, does that then get redirected to the Busby shelter as the operator, or do you still, as Simcoe County, intend to be fielding a lot of the questions from residents if there's a curiosity or if there's questions about how it's operating?
Certainly, we will work really closely with the Busby Centre as the operator. We have when the temporary motel model was in place. But the contact from the county's end is available and will continue to be available. And the distribution recently of a couple of hundred near neighbor letters a couple of weeks back now still provided that contact information, Councillor Cunningham, as well as the details around the early evening to mid-morning operating hours for the facility, and but we will maintain that contact as well.
And I apologize, I do have one more question based on that, Wendy, and thank you for the update. I had forgotten about the communication you sent out around the letters. Are those still coming back, or is there any feedback at this time? If people did get them and responded, that would be a benefit for us to be aware of around any questions or anything we can support around redirecting, or anything that we should have at hand as you get that back, and if there's a summary that's coming forward.
Certainly, we have a point of contact within my department, the Community Services Department, who is responding to any of the inquiries by phone or email. Thus far, folks seem to be, once understanding the nature of the operation, quite understanding of the temporary need for this throughout the coldest months of the year. We certainly are keeping track of the concerns, and certainly can reach out to our partners here at the city with a summary if that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Kungle. And we'll now move on to Councillor Corser.
Actually, my question was not directly related to the Rose Street project.
Perhaps if you could provide it then in written form afterwards, and I'm sure they'll be able to get you all the information you're looking for.
Thank you.
Councillor Rittman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and first of all, thank you, Greg and Wendy, for your report. Very interesting and useful, and the work that you do is really important, and it's very complex. And I think all of us around this table are glad that we're not responsible for it, but that you are. And I guess the other thing that we're all a little sad that I hear you're retiring, Greg, and we wish you all the best in that next stage of your life. I'm trying to get a grip on the numbers. I heard you say that you did a homelessness survey, and you came up with about 750 people, and half of them were in Barrie, so that gives me a number of 350 round numbers. On your slide, you have a capacity of 152 shelter beds. And I guess my first question is, does 152 include the 50 at Rose Street or not?
No, it does not.
It does not. All right. So that means that we have 200 when Rose Street is up and running. But the sort of homeless number that you did in your survey was around 350. So there's 150 people that are not, we don't have capacity for. Is that reasonable, or is that, am I making some faulty math here?
Thank you for the question. The homeless enumeration is conducted, it's a point-in-time count. So on that particular day in January of 2022, that was the number. It was 722 in the county as a whole, and then approximately 50% of those individuals reporting being residents or attached to the city of Barrie. It also takes into account individuals who are provisionally accommodated, perhaps might be couch surfing, but don't have their own permanent accommodation and therefore identify as homeless. And one of the pieces with respect to the outreach numbers or the unsheltered that aren't attached to a shelter system, is the data for that. It is a bit challenging right at the moment in that it does not define unique individuals. So although our funded outreach teams make contact with individuals that are living unsheltered, we have no way at this moment of identifying are those duplicate individuals, or as opposed to individuals that are residing within shelter services. We know those are unique individuals and can connect that through our homeless individuals and families information system. That is something that we're working on as a part of our system review as an improvement, but at this point in time, that number is a little ambiguous at the moment.
All right. Just to follow up on that, thank you, and I understand your job is complex and ever fluid. I guess then when I listen to what you've said, and I know that you keep quite good track of the number of beds that are actually in use every day, and I understand that there are vacant beds as of this past Monday. How many were vacant? Like how much capacity do we have at this moment?
Thank you. A fair question, and it is very fluid. So I can provide to you that 2 days ago there were 27 beds in the system. 21 of those were in the city of Barrie. A couple of days prior to that, it was double that number, and it's very fluid. But as of 2 days ago, it was 27 in the system, 21 in Barrie that were unoccupied.
And the intention is that you would fill those 21 before you would go to Rose Street. That's correct? Okay. Maybe I can just move to a slightly different area, and that is transitional housing. It seems, I guess the question that I have is, why are we seeing people living rough when there is shelter capacity available? And is it that we're not providing the right things, or what is it that we need to provide? And I'm wondering if sort of two things. One is, are we missing out on the mental health piece, or are we missing out, and should we be moving to a model that looks much more at transitional housing and not shelters as much?
If you could answer that question, but Councillor Rimmel, I'll ask you to stay on the 20 Rose Street. We'll let this one go, and then after that, just make sure we stay on the 20 Rose Street.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Excuse me. Very complex question, Councillor Rittma. Certainly lots of complexities with individuals that are experiencing homelessness. Shelter, and I will quote one of our shelter providers, is not the ultimate destination. It isn't housing, and certainly but it is a necessary, critical first step on that continuum. That is one of the very crucial reasons that we were undertaking and are undertaking our comprehensive review of our system, is how do we look at improving the outcomes for individuals that enter into homeless or who have been homeless, to move away from a reliance upon emergency shelter and move to more appropriate, more permanent housing solutions. Transitional housing may be a part of that. Supportive housing may be a part of that. There's likely a range along that continuum.
Thank you, Councillor Rittman. We'll now go to Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Just if you can give me a little bit better background on 20 Rose, because I believe the last time we received a presentation, the unit count for that property was around that same 150 that's being spoken about again tonight. I know myself, and I believe Mayor Lehman at the time, also expressed some interest in getting some greater density on that property, because doing some quick math here, that still only accounts to 79 units per hectare, whereas that particular parcel of land with its surroundings could probably very easily handle 120 units per hectare. Why is it that the unit count is still where it is. And then the second piece to my question would be, obviously we've got some other affordable housing projects elsewhere within the county. How do people get chosen to go into that? Because I would highly suspect that it's probably not our homeless population that are being selected for these affordable units, or I could be wrong in assuming that.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, there's a number of, the first part, if I could answer, is we set a minimum of 150 units. Certainly heard City Council comments, and also that would go back to County Council for final budgeting. So right now we have approval for pre-building design or development design. We have asked for modeling to increase the numbers, but we would want to take back the numbers to County Council for their final decision. It would be a decision by Council, but we have asked the consultant to do a couple different modelings based on your comments. But we're not, sorry if I could just add, we're not at the point where it's been approved for development. It was approved for pre-design to come back with some numbers for Council's deliberation.
Great, thank you. And just one other follow-up to that. I see your scheduling when it comes to construction. You're hoping that you'll have a shovel in the ground in the spring of 2024. Now, obviously, we're in the middle of a affordability crisis here in Ontario, let alone just Barrie. Is there any way to be able to speed up that timeline to be able to deal with some of the crisis that we all inevitably can see firsthand here?
It would be a council decision. We'll take back the information shortly, actually. I believe it's before the end of the first quarter. We'll be taking something back to council with a budget and a costing, and then it would be up to council deliberations, and certainly city reps would be on the Human Services Committee where that debate would occur, or that deliberation.
Thank you. And actually, I'm just curious, because I guess I asked two questions in one at first. When it came to the piece about who would occupy these units and how that selection process, are you in a position to be able to advise us how that process takes place?
Absolutely. So for our social housing, we have a centralized wait list. That's the rent geared to income, the deeper subsidy, and the more traditional housing that came to the county back in '99 from the province. There's the affordable housing, which these builds in some cases have a mix of them, because it's really maximizing opportunities. There'll be several bedroom units, and then one bedrooms, and then also we're looking at bachelor units. We did receive approval or direction from County Council to include a percentage of each new build to have housing first individuals who may require some supports to their housing stability. And so I believe we're at 5% of each new build would be going towards individuals who would maybe need some housing first wraparound support. Sorry. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor Medal, and thank you both for the presentation. I have two questions in relation to 20 Rose Street. My first being, I know that we're hyper-focused right now on getting it open and setting an occupancy date, but I think equally important is going to be looking at an exit strategy come spring as well, so we can avoid some of the challenges and concerns that we experienced when the temporary motel closed and the feeling or perception that people were being displaced. So maybe I'll reframe my question and make it more of a request if we can get an update on what that exit strategy is going to look like, if you don't have that answer this evening. And then secondary to that is when spring comes, and this is clearly identified as a temporary facility, but given that Barrie contributed $400,000 of the $1.2 million that it cost, what is the intention for the repurposing of this asset? And can we assume that it will be continued to be utilized in Barrie or within the city limits?
So I could start with the last part of the question, and then I might need you to remind me the first part. So there has not been a decision made. This all happened very quickly. We received the direction from County Council and moved very quickly, and that could be part of the communication. We didn't even know for sure if we'd be able to secure a vendor in time to have something ready. And so that was part of the delay, and certainly I can appreciate the comments, but I just wanted to note that. In terms of exit strategy, it'll depend on how many have been using the shelter. Right now we do have capacity. There may not be full capacity of this site, or there may be, but we'll certainly be working through that. We did have learnings, certainly, I think all service areas across the province and the nation. We had a conversation with colleagues in PEI who are looking at a similar vendor, and we were working through some similar experiences, surprisingly. And they were sharing, and we were too, that really what a great best practice is to bring in those wraparounds. So the community paramedicine from the county paramedic services, the CMHA supports like we did in the motel model, but they're more intensified, and we've reallocated Ontario Works staff within our own division to be on site where possible to help divert or assist people in finding. Sometimes it involves relocating to communities where they have family and services where they're going to thrive. So those are some examples. Did I catch all of your questions?
You did, yeah, thank you. I'm very pleased also to see the integrative services that will be involved in this location. And I think, my questions might be preemptive, so I look forward to receiving an update probably at a later date in terms of the exit strategy, just depending on how things are running, and also on the repurposing of the modular format.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Through you to Mr. Bishop, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the presentation. I think, one of the challenges, and it was hinted to that, there's concerns from residents, understandably. Is there anything that, from evidence or that can be shared that would alleviate concerns that a shelter or a housing facility like this type wouldn't necessarily bring increased crime or concern to a community? Is there data that we can lean on to support that?
Well, I could start with, we don't have data that speaks to the contrary. That's definitely true. And I think what's really important is the county does own this site, and we've worked with the service provider around some terms that we want to make it successful for the neighborhood as well. And we'll certainly be addressing issues if they arise where we can, recognizing that individuals, when they leave the property, can go wherever they like, but certainly will focus on wraparound supports where necessary. And Wendy, I don't know if you have anything to provide on any of the research. We've looked at a number of models out there.
Thanks, Greg. And just briefly, if I may, certainly, as Mr. Bishop has indicated, right, that keeping folks really connected to that system of supports is the priority, and that is part of what the driver was behind this model, is to maintain those community-based connections. With respect to the partnership between County of SIMCOE staff and shelter staff, one of the pieces that I can tell you from statistically right off the top, and it was just a best practice developed during the wind down of the temporary motel model, was through that partnership and very intensive case management support. More than 76% of those individuals were connected to supports beyond the temporary motel shelter model. So applying that same level of intervention in partnership with the shelter provider throughout this model, and again, we anticipate that we will see success in that, similar to what we experienced in the wind down of the motel model.
Great, thank you. And I know Mr. Bishop was around during these times, but is it safe to say, I'm recalling back when the Out of the Cold began, and it was offered through a variety of churches across the city, many that were close to residential neighborhoods, similar to the model, people came in the evening, left in the morning. I don't recall there being a great deal of concerned neighborhoods that hosted. St. Mary's comes to mind, and other churches that hosted these type of services weren't, concerns didn't follow with this. Am I remembering that correctly, Mr. Bishop?
That's my memory as well. And also, there were other communities that also had Out of the Cold programs. Midland is one example, and similar comment I could make there as well.
Thank you. And I remember also Barrie Police Services being very supportive and attentive to these facilities as well in the model. So thank you. And maybe one final question, and it kind of tweaked when Councillor Congo was asking about daytime. Is the assumption that for the folks who will use this Rose Street property, they're already in our community, such that they're already using these facilities, the Busby, the library, the rec centers in the daytime to keep warm, to keep active. So we're not having to create something, they're already here. Is that fair?
Thank you. That's a fair point, a good point. Thank you. Yes.
And maybe just one, do we have good metrics or information on the the last known address of an individual who might be in our shelter system, such that we know that they're from Barrie and area? And is there any, with our shelter system currently having capacity, which is a good news story, that adding more shelter beds, is it a strategy that will help throughout the area, which has pros and cons, or is it meant to support those who are currently experiencing homelessness in Barrie?
Mike, if I could, through you, Mayor Nuttall, there is a transient nature to individuals, some individuals who are experiencing homelessness, and that could include folks coming from the city, north, even further north, stopping. Some go to the city. We know that. We know that through Ontario Works, because most individuals would be eligible for Ontario Works if they're homeless, and that is part of the work that our staff do in terms of assessment. So I know anecdotally that there is certainly a pattern of individuals moving, often though to where there are supports, but in many cases sometimes there's a need to return back where they have more emotional and personal supports too, and that's always helpful.
Thank you to you both, and thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I may have gone a little bit off of the Rose Street on that last question, so I thank you for your latitude.
Thank you, Councillor Harris, and Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thanks, Mayor Nuttall. This question is actually for Ms. Banfield. On the 20 Rose Street, it is zoned institution, and looking at what's allowed on institution, there's a social service component that allows housing, but it's not very defined on duration of the housing for the social service. So is there a better definition of how long this can stay with the zoning of institution?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Thompson. So the social service facility is the use, and it references that housing can be part of the service. And so there isn't necessarily, the residential piece is tied to the social service definition. And so because that's always permitted, there wouldn't be a tie-in to the residential use being limited to a temporary point in time.
So pretty much with the zoning that's permitted today, we could be building a modular hotel there, where it could end up being longer than just a winter program. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Thompson. So the permissions for the temporary structures were tied to an exemption from full site plan approval that had some limitations on the timing. I can share with you that we are working already with the county on the permanent application that's going to be coming forward. And we have some detailed meetings already scheduled and that sort of thing. So there is, as I said, something tied to this current situation being temporary. And again, we have been working with the county, and we've already seen some preliminary plans for the permanent proposal.
Okay. This question through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Mr. Bishop. So the numbers were 27, and at times capacity was like open 54 beds at double and stuff like that. You said it's, it fluctuates. Can you guarantee the residents, like there's quite a few residents here for this presentation, which we don't normally have, so there's a large concern, with behaviors, and to Councillor Harris, who's done this work for a long time. Times have changed from the out of the cold to the people using these services for a variety of reasons, mental health, addiction, which their behaviors have changed also, where we can look at the data through police calls to, from, you know, the Busby, the Comfort Inn, the Travel Lodge, they increase quite a bit, right? But with there being capacity already, can we guarantee these residents that we're not creating more capacity to bring in more of, you know, the people needing services? Where is there capacity in Collingwood, Midland, Penetang, that we're not becoming the regional hub, which it ends up creating problems for all our residents and the people that need these services as well. To your point, people recover better in communities with supports, and the chances of them, you know, starting on a better path is with supports of the family, you know, and other things in their own communities. So I was wondering, like, if we've already got room and capacity, is there a possibility that nobody ever occupies this?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, I think that's premature for me to say. I mean, I guess what I would say is that with the colder weather, there may be, and I would hope, that individuals who are living unsheltered would come in and access the additional space. But what we were, where this came from, we were creating this from the direction, and I know there was a concern at the City Council and also the County of Simcoe were concerned about what about the wind down. We were hearing that there may be more people. We did all the intensive supports that Wendy talked about. We were able to get 76% of the individuals sorted, but recognize there may still be an additional need, recognizing that we are hearing from the outreach teams that there are still individuals living rough and the colder weather is coming. So I think that's the context or the history of where we got to today. In answer to your question, it's not intended to, it's intended to address a perceived need currently, and I can't control where people move and what services they access in different communities. Or we can't, I should say. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Just a couple questions of clarification. My understanding is that there was a request at Human Services for this facility to take place. The City of Barrie ended up footing the bill for about a third of it. Is that correct?
City of Barrie, and I would look to your staff for clarification around that. There was a motion at our council that City of Barrie brought forward asking the county to match the dollars. I could look at the councillors who were there to match those dollars proportionally.
The reason I asked that question of clarification is because you know, I'm very wary that it's easy to bring somebody in from the outside and to you know, ask a lot of tough questions. But the reality was that it originated from a request from the City of Barrie for, I believe, this location to the Human Services Committee, which is what in turn created this this coming forward. Am I maybe not speaking loud enough? I think I have some people leaning forward. So I just wanted to clarify that and say thank you for coming and taking those tough questions. I do have just a couple of follow-ups based on some of the questions that were asked around the table. So the institutional zoning, to Ms. Banfield, so the institutional zoning for 20 Rose Street, could you tell me how that differs from the institutional zoning for Trinity or Collier Street United Church?
Mayor Lehman, I'm sorry, Mayor Nuttall, apologies. Mayor Nuttall, so the Trinity United Church actually has a commercial zoning, so it's different than the institutional zoning.
What about Collier Street?
Collier Street, I'd have to pull that zoning up, but I do know that a lot of the churches, certainly in the downtown area, do have commercial zoning, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a social service facility wouldn't be permitted in those zones. Social service facility is a use that's permitted in many of our zones across the city.
My understanding was, for the most part, obviously a commercial venue takes places of worship, but an institutional zoning was traditionally what was used for a place of worship. Am I out of date? You know, I haven't been around the table for 8 years, so I could be completely wrong.
No, Mayor Nuttall, you're exactly correct. That institutional zoning does tend to be where you're seeing churches, places of worship, schools, community centers, but there are some churches that are in industrial zones or commercial zones, because places of worship are permitted in different zones across the city as well.
So the need for 20 Rose Street was related to, from what we heard in the presentation, was related to essentially an end to out of the cold. Is that what I'm understanding?
I'm sorry, Mayor Lehman, now I did it. Thank you, Michelle. Mayor Nuttall, I'm not clear on your question. I need you to rephrase it.
Out of the cold,
yeah,
which was kind of the preemptive program to what I think I'm seeing at 20 Rose Street. Is that like this program existed, and then at some point it was said that there was, in the presentation, that it was no longer essentially allowed to continue due to fire code or incorrect use or incorrect zoning or something. Is that correct?
Yes, and I would turn to the experts in-house here.
Okay, so
but the out of the cold, if I could just, did disband several years ago, and it morphed into increased capacity at the Mulcaster site location at Busby. And then I would defer to others for the detail.
Ms. McAlpine.
Mayor Nuttall, thank you for the question. And Mr. Bishop is, of course, correct. Out of the Cold program was operated in conjunction with a number of the faith organizations in the community. The faith organizations experienced challenges with retaining volunteers and supporting Out of the Cold, and the Busby Center took over that operation. The city actually provided some funding to Busby to allow for additional units at that location. At the time, it was not related to fire code or building code, more in terms of what the faith community was able to support, and of course the Busby Center, their willingness to offer the program rather than have that burden placed on the faith community.
Okay, so just to confirm that, essentially the faith community decided they were no longer able to provide these support services. It was then picked up by the Busby Center, and where we are today is that there's an increased need, therefore increased capacity. So I guess my final question is this. If an individual, let's say an individual at either the Busby or with the county SIMCOE gets a call from, let's say, North York. Hey, we are out of shelter space in North York. Do you have any space in Barrie today? What's the answer?
I'm going to turn to Wendy, make sure I'm correct on this, but the shelters within Simcoe County are certainly communicating, and more than ever. During the pandemic, we were trying to ensure that people were safe. And if I could, earlier there was a question around behaviors, and just if I could remind folks that during the height of the pandemic and various waves, there was really limited services available. That's different now. And in terms of shelter capacity, I'm not aware of communications, sort of beyond our borders of the county with the providers. Is that correct?
Thank you. I might just add that in all of our contracted agreements with all of our funded providers, Mayor Nuttall, is a requirement to apply a diversion first approach, and folks there is a screening process around what available supports exist for that individual, perhaps in any area, right? Whether it's here in Barrie or through family or whatever, but there is a requirement around diversion first, and certainly there is connection to other communities. And we have been assured by our providers that individuals are are being diverted back to their home communities should they be receiving calls of that nature.
So we're not going to end up in a situation where, just to clarify, we're not going to end up in a situation where someone in Ottawa says, hey, there's room in Barrie, let's find transportation because we know that there's a bed there, even albeit a temporary shelter, but there's a bed there. So I think that's what I just got communicated. Perfect. I think that, sorry, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Actually, something that just came to mind just throughout some of the questioning, or I guess that just took place. So it says that it will anticipate that it'll be closing sometime in the spring. So do you anticipate this is going to be a 4-month operation or a 6-month operation? Or are you going to be very fluid? And the reason I'm asking that is I started doing some quick math here. When you're looking at a $1.2 million budget for 50 beds, and some of those beds probably will not be occupied because we're not occupying 100% as it is, and I start doing the math, and I'm coming up with numbers that are very aligned with the same cost of a hotel room. So I was just kind of curious when you guys look at the budget and what the cost per night per bed for your period of time that you anticipate this to be going on, is it in line with the hotel model? Because that's what it appears to me.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, the motel model was quite a much greater cost. Not so much per room, but there was a number of operating and additional staffing costs that were required through that. Now, in fairness, a lot of those staff were required because other services were not currently active, right, during the pandemic. And maybe, Wendy, if you'd like to speak to the sustainability and the challenge around that financially.
Certainly. Thank you. Certainly with respect to the motel model, there was a public report that speaks to the cost of that model in the City of Barrie under pandemic-specific funding, which was our provincial social services relief fund, at $850,000 per month was the cost of that model to sustain that during the pandemic. This model, certainly to your point, Councillor, at $1.2 million contribution, that also includes the capital acquisition as well as the setup costs for the modular structure, in addition to the operating for this facility over the course of the next few months until the spring.
Yeah, thanks. Just to follow up, I assume these modular units are being leased, though. They're not being purchased for that kind of money, because these modular units, I know for a fact, are quite expensive.
We were able to work with our vendor and purchase the units, and for that future possibility, recognizing we would need to return to County Council to make further recommendations for future use, but we wanted to gain as much value out of that acquisition as possible for future use.
Seeing no other questions, thank you so much for coming this evening, and we certainly look forward to the correspondence and information coming down the line the next few months, and hopefully they remain empty, because I think that's a good sign for the community. So, thank you.
And thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Now that we've completed the presentation portion of our agenda, we're going to move on to inquiries. Do I have any inquiries on my left and on my right? Seeing no inquiries, we will move on to announcements on my left. Councillor Hamilton.
I just wanted to announce the launch of the new Ward 10 Advisory Council. We had just nearly 24 Ward 10 residents express interest in joining the Ward 10 Advisory Council. We've identified 8 members to join, and we have our first kickoff meeting scheduled for January 9th and a draft terms of reference. So just wanted to make that be known that we're getting ready to go in the new year.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. And Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. In keeping with tonight's theme, I'd just like to announce that the Barrie Farmers Market is accepting donated clothing for 3 very good charities in the area: Youth Haven, Busby Center, and Ryan's Hope. They have a big farmers market Christmas tree set up in the rotunda right here at City Hall, where you can donate anytime, and or you can bring your donations to the market by noon on Saturday when you're coming down to enjoy the market, hopefully. What they're looking for is gloves, hats, mitts, scarves, socks, and Tim Hortons. I'm sure they'll accept country style as well. Gift cards and youth clothing. So just wanted to make that announcement on behalf of our friends at the Barrie Farmers Market. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon. Are there any other questions or any other announcements this evening? Seeing none, I will move on to the announcements here. It is budget time. Taxpayers looking to provide feedback on how to spend tax dollars can use the budget allocator tool. The deadline to submit your comments is by midnight on January 6th, 2023 in order to be Council ahead of the 2023 budget deliberations. For more information, please visit buildingbarrie.ca/budget. The city invites holiday shoppers to support local downtown Barrie businesses during the month of December by enjoying 2 hours of free on-street parking. For more information, please visit barrie.ca/parking. In celebration of this Christmas and holiday season, the Recreation and Culture Services is offering exciting activities for residents over the holidays throughout the city's recreation and cultural facilities. For a list of events, locations, and programming details, please visit barrie.ca/events. The annual New Year's Eve Downtown Countdown celebration will be taking place on December 31st. The event will feature rock band Sloan as the headliner and Splash and Boots as the children's performer. For more information, please visit barrie.ca/downtown countdown. All Barrie households will be receiving the 2023 long-awaited 2023 waste reduction calendar this month. If you don't receive a calendar, copies will be available at your local community center, City Hall, or the Barrie Public Library locations starting the week of December 19th. For information, please visit barrie.ca/calendar. Residents are welcome to join myself and members of Barrie City Council at the Mayor's New Year's Levy. This is to be held on January 8th at the East Bayfield Community Center between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. and the Allendale Recreation Center between 2 and 4 p.m. Free public skating will also be provided. For more information, please visit barrie.ca/mayors-new-years-levy. We can maybe remove some of the dashes in the future. As the weather permits, the ice surfaces at the Circle at the Centre for Pleasure Skating and Wildwire Park, formerly Centennial Park South, designated for hockey, are open daily from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week. For more information, please visit barrie.ca/community recreation environment. A reminder to residents that on-street overnight parking restrictions are now in effect until March 31st in the downtown business improvement area between 3 and 6 a.m., on city streets between 12:01 and 7 a.m., and hybrid and waterfront parking areas from 12:01 to 5 a.m. For more information, visit barrie.ca/parking. Before we move on to bylaws, this will be the last City Council meeting of 2022, and on behalf of City Council and certainly our public service here in the City of Barrie, I'd like to take this opportunity to extend best wishes, happy holidays, and Merry Christmas for this season to the citizens of Barrie. Our next General Committee meeting will be on January the 11th, 2023. Bylaws, Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris, that leave be granted to introduce the following bills, and these bills be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bill 118, 119, 120, 121, 122, 123, 124, 125, and 126.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris that leave be granted to introduce the following bills, and these bills be ready first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bills 118, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26. Do I have any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor on my right and on my left, it carries. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harris. Leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed, the confirmation bylaw.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Harris that leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bill 127. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, those in favor on my right and on my left. It's approved. Before we get a motion for adjournment, I just want to wish each member of council and our staff a very wonderful season, happy holidays, and Merry Christmas. And I hope you all get time with your friends and family, which after, especially for council, after a campaign season is something that I think that we all need. So do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Kungle, seconded by Councillor Corser at 9:21. All those in favor? And it's approved. We are adjourned.